Could Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 3 get DLC? Well, according to the game's director, Naoki Hamaguchi, it's a possibility. Also, what about doing a mobile version of the 7 Remake trilogy? We'll discuss that and more in today's video. So, let's talk about it. Alright, so the whirlwind press tour that Naoki Hamaguchi is on just keeps trucking along. He's got another event later this week on the 24th of October where he's going to be doing a panel at a convention with some of the English voice cast. That's Britt Baron, who is the voice of Tifa, Brianna White, who is the voice of Aerith, and John Bentley, who is the voice of Barrett. So hopefully that's going to be a much more relaxed event. He can meet the fans, hang out with some of the cast, and just kind of do a much more laid back question answering situation, because I would have to assume doing these press tours is probably super repetitive because so many of these outlets are asking him the same exact question or just kind of slightly rephrasing the questions that they're asking, and he can only answer these questions in so many different ways before it becomes super repetitive. And some of these questions he just can't answer because it involves spoilers, so it's got to be really exhausting. But he seems to be in good spirits, he's having fun, he's getting to meet a ton of people as he's traveling the world and just really seeing how many fans are actually out there. So if he's having fun and he's doing well, I think that's all that really matters. So moving over to the interview, this one comes to us from Kai Tatsumoto of WCCF Tech, where they start off first with the idea of, hey, could you ever bring the 7 Remake trilogy to the mobile market? Hamaguchi says, obviously we do want to bring our games to a wider audience. When we look at the market landscape of the mobile side, particularly iPhone and Android users, we don't really feel that there's quite the demand to justify us creating a mobile port of the 7 Remake project. If there is a demand, we would definitely want to look forward to hearing that. As of this moment, I don't think the demand is quite there yet from a business perspective. We will continue to look at the market trends, and if there is the right opportunity at the right moment, then that's when we will revisit this topic. So I gotta say, first off, his response, very refreshing, very reassuring, because I feel like in the older days of Square Enix under their previous regime of Yosuke Matsuda, he would have been like, do a mobile version. We're going to port this project. It's going to be on mobile. It's going to be episodic. We're going to make so much money. Yosuke Matsuda just really ran that company into the ground. But hearing Hamaguchi's response here of like, if there's no demand there, we're not going to do it, but we'll take a look at it later. And a lot of that I think has to do with the current people in charge of Square Enix, and that would be Takashi Kiryu, who's really trying to get this company back on track. They're really focusing on their console games and making a push for multi-platform. Obviously, there is still some focus on the mobile side, which Square Enix does not have a great track record with their mobile games. Some games come out and get shut down within a year. Some last a little bit longer. These games do seemingly perform better in Japan than they do here in America, but the mobile market in Japan is way different than it is here in America. There's way more public transportation there. More people are willing to pull out their phone, play a game of like Monster Hunter or Final Fantasy VII with Ever Crisis, do their thing, they collect their daily rewards, and then they move on. But here in America, it's much different. Although gaming trends are leaning way more towards PC and mobile these days, but it's got to be a specific type of mobile game to really do well. And they did recently announce Dissidia on mobile, a new version, Dwellum. I'm still not quite sure on the pronunciation, so there is still some focus there on the mobile side, but I just don't see them doing a mobile version of the remake project. I don't think it's necessary, and I think it would require way too much time and money and resources to get that going. Also, the 7 Remake trilogy is going multi-platform now, and it's going to be on the Switch too, which is also a mobile device. It also acts as a console, so I think that kind of has the mobile aspect, so to speak, of bringing that trilogy to the mobile side covered, because it's just going to be on there. It's just going to be way easier to play on the go if you really want to, instead of playing on a smartphone. But also, oddly enough, they kind of already do have a version of the 7 Remake project on mobile, and that's through Ever Crisis, which has a few different campaigns you can play. There's OG FF7, which has a lot of the newer assets from the remake trilogy. There's Crisis Core, and then there is the First Soldier Episode 1 and 2. And I've always had the idea of maybe you could somehow find a way to rework Ever Crisis into a mobile game or even a console game that plays as a true real game from beginning to end. And what I mean by that is in each of these different campaigns in Ever Crisis, the way they're structured is they're sectioned out by chapters, and then those chapters have subsections. Some of those subsections are purely just cutscene stuff with the characters talking, some are purely combat, and then every once in a while they let you control your little chibi character and run around an environment, but it's pretty rare. So those campaigns are kind of cut up into different sections. It's designed to be a mobile experience. You play a section, you move on with your day kind of thing. So I think they would have to find a way to take the assets from Ever Crisis and rework it into something completely new where you can press start on your controller, control your little chibi character from one point in the game all the way to the other end and make it a true full real game. And I think there's room for that somewhere down the line. They could take those assets, make a smaller scale 7 Remake game that has the turn-based combat that, you know, some fans still want, and maybe it just follows the original game a little bit closer, because I see the same comment so much on my Ever Crisis recaps of, man, they need to put Ever Crisis on console. So I think there's a demand there. So people do want that type of experience, but in the form of a real, true, full game that they can play on console, which you could then probably port to mobile if you really wanted to. But I would much rather Square focus purely on the console side of things instead of worrying about mobile. And again, seeing Hamaguchi's response, it is very reassuring. They're not just going to do it just to do it. So up next, they ask Hamaguchi about the lack of DLC for Rebirth, but would they ever consider doing DLC for Part 3, much like what they did with Remake Integrate? Hamaguchi goes on to say, there were definitely some ideas to create a Rebirth DLC, and that was the plan at a certain point in time. But when we revisited this topic and we thought about what our priorities should be and what the fans are looking forward to the most, we figured that what fans want the most is to bring the third installment as soon as possible. That would take priority over the Rebirth DLC, so we decided to take that approach. With that being said, once we release the third installment, there is the possibility of having a DLC for that third installment. With the conclusion of the 7 Remake trilogy, there's probably going to be a much wider audience for Final Fantasy as a whole. Whether we bring another new DLC or a full title, that's something we are actively considering. So this is super cool. This is also kind of a mixture of new info and old info, because about 10 months or so ago, around the time Hamaguchi was promoting Rebirth on PC, he did another round of interviews that we covered here on the channel, and he was asked this very same question about Rebirth getting DLC or not. And it's kind of funny because at that point in time, they had already confirmed no, Rebirth will not be getting DLC. But they did ask him some questions about the future of Final Fantasy VII and if they would ever do something else. And at that time, he toyed around with the idea of, you know, maybe doing a new game completely, maybe focusing on other characters or other sections of the world, but nothing at that point was super concrete. So this was addressed a long time ago, very, very similar. For some reason that didn't get a lot of coverage from a lot of channels, which I was kind of surprised by, but now the bigger change to this type of question and response is that he's just straight up saying, yeah, Part 3 DLC, we're actively considering it. So that's really, really cool and exciting. Now, in regards to Rebirth not getting DLC, again, that was the right move. As cool as it would have been to do DLC, maybe focused on someone like Vincent, telling his backstory that we learned in Dirge, all the way up until the moment he decides to hide away in the basement of Nibelheim in that coffin. I think you could have told a journey of Vincent, get players up to speed on who he is, what he's been through. So he would have been the perfect candidate for DLC for Rebirth. But they're probably going to put that into Remake Part 3. That makes the most sense. And again, just trying to focus all of your efforts onto Part 3 was the right move. A lot of us are waiting for it. There's a lot of momentum still being built up from the Remake trilogy with it going multi-platform. So that was the right move. Now, as far as DLC for Part 3, what do? I think first and foremost, it's hard to answer that because we don't know what the game is. The game has to come out, we gotta play it, they have to stick the landing of the game, and everything has to go really, really well before we can consider, okay, what about DLC? And the big issue that I raised in that video so many months ago was that, what do? If you have an ending to the Remake trilogy that is finite, somewhat bittersweet, but feels like a proper conclusion, Sephiroth's gone, Jenova's gone, what do you do for DLC? What do you have as your enemy? Because it's really hard to go bigger and badder than Sephiroth and Jenova, or do you just retcon what happens in the story and find a way to bring them back? I don't know if that would necessarily work. The other idea I had is what if you just do like a proper DLC epilogue which focuses on where the characters are maybe a couple of weeks or months removed from the ending of the remake trilogy. Is Cloud doing his delivery thing? Can I ride around on this world on his motorbike? Because that would be super cool. Would it just be DLC that's showing the process of this world being rebuilt and living to learn without Shinra? I think you could do a really cool expansive epilogue that still focuses on that. You could still have the combat stuff. There's still going to probably be monsters hanging around. You could also add some extra monsters that maybe didn't get taken care of within the main story in that campaign. You could also do an Advent Children DLC, which again, based on where the story's going, it really feels like they want to avoid Cloud and the characters going into, the pretty rough trial that is Advent Children. Obviously, Cloud and everyone comes out okay on the other side of that, but I think they kind of want to get Cloud's emotional and physical and mental recovery started towards the end of Remake Part 3, because we've talked about Cloud's journey and, will he be whole again by the end of it and avoid Advent Children? And I think the important thing here, the key thing that we should take away is that Cloud doesn't have to be 100% better and cured by the end of the game. I think it's just important that they show to the player that his first step on the journey of recovering his mental health is starting and that he's going to be okay. I think that's just the big key factor there that they need to nail. He doesn't have to be 100% fine. He doesn't have to be post-Advent Children Cloud, happy-go-lucky. He just needs to start that journey of, recovering himself. So I don't know if Advent Children would be an option. Another avenue, Deep Ground. Whether or not we fully take care of Deep Ground in Part 3, we don't know, but you could do DLC, which is kind of Dirge-like, which focuses on Vincent and Yuffie and the rest of the party as they work to try and fully put away Deep Ground, should they still be around after the remake trilogy completes. So you could do like a quasi-Dirge DLC that would just be a lot better. The other option, and I think this one is probably the most likely, although it might upset some people, you could do DLC that takes place during the main story campaign, but it adds new content. So maybe they want to get super ambitious and create a brand new weapon, and that's post-game DLC that you can find that weapon, or it takes place somewhere in the middle of the story and you can battle that weapon and explore a new area. Maybe they expand on the sea. Maybe they add in something like Omega. There was a really cool battle in the new threat mod between Omega and I think Shinryu, where it was worked into the story where you went to the island that held the Knights of the Round materia, but that materia orb, unfortunately, was right in between a battle between Omega and Shinryu that had been taking place for who knows how long, and it was seemingly just never going to end. It was this eternal stalemate, and if you wanted to get the Knights of the Round, you had to fight Omega and Shinryu at the same time in order to get that. So I'm not saying that they should put Knights of the Round in DLC. I'm just saying that you could add a character like Omega or a Shinryu into that universe as post-game content to just kind of keep things flowing. And I think that would be the right move to take, just adding new monsters and maybe a new area to explore post-game, something that's not super consequential to the overall story, because the moment you take story out of the main game and pluck it into DLC, that upsets a lot of people. I don't think I'd like that, and it can sometimes just be really, really jarring. Final Fantasy XVI, for example, did that with some of its DLCs, where I think all of the DLC, actually, now that I think about it, took place within the story of Final Fantasy XVI, but it came out afterwards, so it was a little bit jarring in terms of, like, where in the story does this actually take place? Why couldn't we just do it in the main story? So there's a lot that goes into it. But then again, he does throw out the possibility of a full new title, which to me, again, really just kind of sounds like Dirge of Cerberus. It wouldn't even have to be like a straight up remake of Dirge. You just completely redo Dirge, rewrite that story, rewrite how the characters are involved, use the same combat from the remake trilogy. That just makes the most sense, but still keep some elements that people are familiar with, because again, that big hurdle that you have to find a way over or just accept is that I don't think you're gonna get bigger than Sephiroth and Genova. It's just not possible for this world. But the fact that they're actually considering it is pretty cool, and I do agree. I do think the audience for not just 7 Remake, but Final Fantasy as a whole will be much bigger when part 3 comes out, especially once it goes multi-platform. And again, this is just anecdotal based on comments I see on my channel, but I see a number of people who are like, these games look cool, but I'm gonna wait until the entire trilogy is out before I start playing, because they want to experience that story in one go. And with it being the finale of a really big trilogy, I think there's going to be a lot more people who have been keeping their eye on this project who are like, okay, I kind of think I should jump in now. I think you might also have, like we said in the previous video, some of those naysayers be a little too curious. They're going to want to see how this game shapes up, how it ends, and what it could potentially lead to. So I do think that they are smart to prepare something maybe, or at least throw around the idea of something just in case that audience does really expand by the end of the remake trilogy. But in conclusion, for me, if they were to do DLC, I think doing a DLC that is a proper epilogue that again just kind of expands on where the characters are would probably be the right move. I also really love again the idea of adding in new monsters to fight, whether it's an Omega or a Shinryu, or maybe you want to, add a new weapon into there, which isn't super consequential maybe to the story, which is kind of weird because the weapons are consequential to the story. Maybe you throw in a Genesis battle, or maybe they just decide to take the Ever Crisis Sephiroth stuff and make it into a proper playable DLC or its own full game, or maybe they just do Dirge as the next full entry into the 7 Remake universe. I don't know. There's a lot of possibilities there, but we gotta see how part 3 actually plays out first. And then to end the interview, they ask Hamaguchi about what his favorite tracks in the remake trilogy are so far. He would say, obviously there's the staples like the Final Fantasy main theme that we've heard over and over, but for me personally, I do like the Stamp song, Bow Wow Wow, Chuggin Stamp. Or is it Chuggin Stamp? One of those. The author agrees, it's very catchy, to which Hamaguchi responds, I hope a lot of people like that track too. I love it. It's probably my favorite track in the remake trilogy so far. There's so many great songs. I could sit here for hours just going through a playlist of YouTube tracks from Remake and from Rebirth and be like, oh my god, this song is so good, it's so insane. There's so many to choose from, but that song in particular is so funny and goofy. And the fact that they made 2 versions of it, one where you're just running around, and then the other version, which is a full-on battle theme, I think is just so wonderful. It's such a fun track. But that is the end of the video. I am Curious Corduroy. Let me know in the comments down below, what do you guys think about what we discussed in today's video? Specifically, if they were to do DLC or a completely new title for the 7 Remake trilogy, what would you personally like to see? Do you want to see a Dirge remake? Do you want to see them take all of the Sephiroth stuff from Ever Crisis? Do you just want to see them expand on 7 Remake by adding new enemies and areas to explore? Let me know in those comments down below. I will see you guys in the next video. Please remember to always be excellent to one another.